The Vorthic Research Collective had been studying human physiology for 3 cycles. When they made their first critical error, they assumed Kellen Voss was typical. Commander BlackHFY watched through the observation dome as the human specimen paced his containment cell, 47 decks below the research station's primary laboratory. The subject's vital signs registered normal, if one could call any human reading normal. Heart rate, 92 beats per minute. Adrenaline, elevated but stable. Neural activity, chaotic, as expected from a species that had somehow weaponized insanity into interstellar travel. Subject exhibits standard mammalian stress responses. Reported biologist Quender, her for eyes tracking data streams across holographic displays. Cortisol levels suggest mild anxiety, nothing more. BlackHFY's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. The Vorthic had cataloged over 1,000 species across 17 galaxies, yet none confounded them like humans. Too fragile to survive most worlds, too primitive to pose a real threat. Yet somehow they carved out an empire spanning 8 systems in less than 2 centuries. Initialized the Kethmori implantation, BlackHFY commanded. The Kethmori parasite, wreathed in its biocontainment field, a translucent, serpentine creature no larger than a human finger, bred specifically for neural integration. In 300 previous trials across dozens of species, the results had been uniform: complete behavioral modification within hours, perfect compliance within days. The host's consciousness would remain intact but subjugated, creating the ideal spy organism. Dr. Nalthix, the project's lead xenobiologist, manipulated the surgical apparatus with practiced precision. The human's cranial structure is surprisingly thick, but penetration should be straightforward. Once the Kethmori reaches the brainstem, integration will begin immediately. 47 decks below, Kellen Voss stopped pacing. He bit a cargo holler before the Vorthic ambush. Nothing special, just another human trying to make a living in the void between stars. Now he pressed his palm against the transparent aluminum barrier of his cell, studying his captors through the observation ports with eyes that burned like cold fire. The surgical beam pierced his skull with mathematical precision. The Kethmori slithered through bone and tissue, seeking the neural pathways that would make this human their willing puppet. Within minutes, the parasite had wrapped itself around Kellen's brainstem, its molecular tendrils beginning the delicate process of chemical integration. Implantation successful, Nalthix announced. Neural bonding initiated. We should see behavioral changes within the hour. But something was wrong. The parasite's bioreadings fluctuated wildly, and Kellen's neural activity spiked beyond anything they recorded from the specimen files. Instead of the expected docility, his movements became more aggressive, more focused. Commander, Quender's voice carried a note of concern. The parasite's showing signs of distress. The human's neurochemistry is unusual. BlackHFY leaned forward, studying the readouts. Human brains produced a cocktail of chemicals that had taken their scientists months to catalog. Dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline, norepinephrine, and dozens of others. But Kellen's brain was flooding with compounds they'd never seen before. Aggressive alkaloids that seemed to be attacking the Kethmori's control mechanisms. Increased sedation, BlackHFY ordered. The medical system flooded Kellen's cell with enough tranquilizers to drop a Regelian battle-ox. The human staggered, then steadied himself, his eyes never leaving the observation ports. When he spoke, his voice carried through the cell's audio pickups with perfect clarity. You made a mistake, Kellen said, his words measured and calm. You thought you were studying just another cargo pilot, but I wasn't always a hauler. Dr. Nalthix checked the bio readings again. Commander, the parasite it's dying. The human's immune system is rejecting it, but not in any way we've observed. It's as if his brain is deliberately killing it. Kellen pressed both hands against the barrier now, and BlackHFY could see something new in the human's expression. Not fear, not desperation, but a cold, calculating fury that made the Vorthic commander's exoskeleton crawl. 12 years, Coalition Special Operations, Kellen continued. Psychological warfare specialist. I've had things in my head before: interrogation drugs, neural disruptors, memory scramblers. I learned to fight them all. The Kethmori's death throws registered across every sensor in the facility, but as it died, something unexpected happened. The parasite's final neural burst carried with it a complete map of the research station's layout, security protocols, and most critically, the location of every Vorthic facility within 50 light years. He's absorbing its memories, Quender whispered. Kellen smiled, and Commander BlackHFY finally understood the magnitude of their error. They hadn't captured a simple cargo hauler. They captured a weapon. The first sign of catastrophe came when maintenance technician Golvan failed to report for his shift. Security found him in sublevel 12, his nervous system intact, but his higher brain functions completely scrambled. A technique the Vorthik recognized from their classified files. On human special operations, Commander BlackHFY stared at the empty containment cell, its transparent aluminum barrier reduced to slag. How long? He demanded. Security breach occurred 4 to 7 minutes ago, Security Chief Krendel reported, his usually composed demeanor cracking. The human somehow overloaded the cell's power distribution system. The energy feedback destroyed 3 entire deck sections. With what equipment? None. Commander. Forensic analysis suggests he used his own body as a conductor, channeling electricity through modified nerve pathways. The amount of current should have killed him instantly. BlackHFY's mandibles ground together in frustration. The HFY, Parasite's dying moments, had provided Kellen Voss with something far more dangerous than mere facility schematics. It had given him complete knowledge of Vorthik physiology, including their species' fatal weakness to specific bioelectric frequencies. The hunt began immediately. 200 Vorthik soldiers flooded the research station's corridors, their plasma rifles charged and their biosensors scanning for human life signs. But Kellen had vanished into the station's maintenance tunnels, where his smaller frame gave him advantages the 7-foot-tall Vorthik couldn't match. Squad leader Nex Goron led 12 soldiers through the primary ventilation system. When the lights went out, emergency illumination cast everything in hellish red shadows, and their helmet displays showed human thermal signatures everywhere impossible. Unless their prey had found a way to confuse their sensors. Contact, Section 7 Alpha, Nex Goron reported into his comm unit. We have. The first soldier died before he could finish the transmission. Kellen dropped from an overhead vent directly onto Trooper Velkin, his improvised weapon a sharpened maintenance strut puncturing the Vorthik's carapace at precisely the right angle to sever his spinal cord. The dying alien's plasma rifle discharged wildly, catching 2 of his squad mates in the concentrated beam. Chaos erupted in the narrow maintenance corridor. The remaining Vorthik soldiers fired blindly, their plasma bursts illuminating brief glimpses of their tormentor as he moved through the shadows like a predator born for killing. Kellen had learned their anatomy from the parasite's memories, where their joints connected, where their organs clustered, how their nervous systems rooted through their chitinous bodies. He's using our own biology against us. Nex Goron screamed into his comm before Kellen's boot connected with the soft spot beneath his helmet, snapping his neck with surgical precision. The carnage spread throughout the station. Kellen moved from section to section, leaving behind corpses and disabled soldiers. He never lingered, never engaged in prolonged combat. Strike, kill, vanish, strike, kill, vanish. Each engagement lasted seconds. Each death was precise and efficient. In the station's central command hub, Dr. Nalthix monitored the slaughter with growing horror. He's not just killing randomly, she told Commander BlackHFY. He's targeting specific personnel. Our xenobiologists, our neural specialists, anyone with knowledge of the Parasite program. Lock down all critical sections, BlackHFY ordered. Seal the laboratory levels. If he wants our research, he'll have to come through the main corridor. But Kellen wasn't interested in their research. As the Vorthik forces consolidated their defensive positions, he made his way to the station's communication ray. The knowledge absorbed from the dying HFY had shown him something that made his blood run cold. This facility was just one of dozens scattered across Vorthik space, each one conducting experiments on captured humans. The communication console required a biometric scan from authorized personnel. Kellen solved this problem by dragging the severed arm of communications officer Trelvax to the scanner. The system recognized the dead alien's biosignature and granted full access. What Kellen found in the data banks made him understand the true scope of the Vorthik threat. Video logs showed hundreds of human subjects, captured from cargo vessels, research stations, even civilian colonies. Most had been subjected to parasite implantation. Those who survived the process were being used as infiltrators, sent back to human space as unwitting spies and saboteurs. But some files showed different experiments, humans being dissected while conscious, their nervous systems mapped and cataloged, their children used as test subjects for biological weapons, designed specifically to target human DNA. Kellen's jaw tightened as he composed his message. Using the station's long-range transmitter, he began broadcasting on all frequencies: coalition military channels, civilian emergency bands, even pirate networks. The message was simple: coordinates, facility layouts, and a complete record of Vorthic war crimes. This is Captain Kellen Voss, Coalition Special Operations, transmitting from Vorthic Research Station KES-7. They've been experimenting on our people. They're planning something big. I'm uploading everything I found. Tell everyone the gloves are off. The transmission lasted 37 seconds before Vorthic security managed to cut the link, but it was too late. The message had already reached 17 coalition monitoring stations, for independent news networks, and dozens of private vessels throughout human space. Commander BlackHFY arrived at the communication center to find Kellen waiting for him, armed with weapons stripped from dead soldiers around them. The bodies of the entire communication staff bore testament to the humans' lethal efficiency. You've doomed your entire species, BlackHFY snarled, raising his plasma rifle. Kellen smiled coldly. No, Commander, I've doomed yours. The Coalition's response exceeded even Kellen's expectations. Within 6 hours of his transmission, Admiral Reiken Nakamura had mobilized the 3rd Fleet strike groups, while General Marcus Holloway began assembling the largest military operation in human history. But the Vorthic Collective wasn't waiting for humanity's counterattack. Deep in the research station's command center, Senior Archon Yetmora materialized via quantum entanglement link, his holographic form towering over the assembled Vorthic leadership. The Archon's presence meant the situation had escalated beyond a simple containment breach. It had become a species-level threat. Explain, Yetmora commanded, his psychic emanations causing several junior officers to collapse. Commander BlackHFY's report was concise and damning. One human soldier had not only resisted their most advanced neural parasite, but had absorbed its knowledge, escaped containment, killed 43 personnel, and broadcast classified intelligence across Coalition space. Worse, preliminary reports suggested other human subjects in different facilities were beginning to exhibit similar resistance patterns. Impossible, Senior Biologist Quender interjected, her multiple eyes darting between data streams. Our psychological profiles indicate humans are herd animals, cooperative, empathetic, vulnerable to manipulation. These observations are consistent across all our studies. Then your studies were incomplete. Yetmora replied, this species possesses a quality we failed to recognize. They become more dangerous. When threatened, contact the War Council. Initiate Protocol Theta 9. BlackHFY's mandibles clicked in surprise. Protocol Theta 9 hadn't been used in for centuries. Not since the extermination of the Kelder hegemony. Archon, surely containment measures are no longer viable. The human has provided his species with detailed schematics of our research facilities, our defensive capabilities, and our biological vulnerabilities. Within days, they will mount rescue operations across 17 star systems. We cannot permit this contamination to spread. The implication sent ripples of fear through the command staff. Protocol Theta 9 called for the complete annihilation of any species deemed dangerous for coexistence. It would require deploying the Collective's planet killer weapons against every human world simultaneously. Meanwhile, Kellen had withdrawn to the station's manufacturing sector, where automated systems continued producing research equipment and biocontainment units. The Kethmori parasite's memories had shown him something that made his blood boil. Detailed plans for a second-generation organism designed specifically for human neurochemistry. The Vorthic weren't just experimenting on individuals. They were developing a weapon to enslave his entire species. Using salvaged components and his special operations training, Kellen began constructing improvised explosives from the manufacturing equipment. Every plasma conduit, every power coupling, every volatile chemical in the facility became part of his arsenal. If he was going to die on this station, he'd take as many of these bastards with him as possible. The Vorthic assault began at 0347 station time. 3 full combat battalions converged on the manufacturing sector, their movements coordinated by battlefield AI that calculated optimal firing solutions and predicted human behavior patterns. They expected to find a desperate, cornered animal. Instead, they found hell. Kellen had rigged the entire sector as a massive trap. The first squads to breach the main access corridor triggered pressure-sensitive charges that brought down 17 tons of structural debris, crushing 12 soldiers instantly. The second wave advanced through the secondary entrances, only to discover that their target had rerouted the sector's plasma conduits through the ventilation system. When Kellen triggered the plasma discharge, superheated energy tore through the confined spaces like the breath of a dying star. Vortex soldiers screamed as their exoskeletons melted, their biosuits failing against temperatures that should have been impossible to generate in a civilian manufacturing facility. He's turned the entire sector into a weapon, reported Major Calvanth as his remaining forces regrouped. Casualty count is approaching triple digits. The human has somehow weaponized our own infrastructure, but Kellen wasn't finished. As Vorthik reinforcements poured into the compromised sector, he activated the final component of his trap cascade failure. In the station's artificial gravity generators, the manufacturing sector's massive industrial equipment, no longer anchored by gravitational fields, became projectiles weighing hundreds of tons each. The carnage was indescribable. Assembly line machinery tumbled through zero gravity like asteroid fragments, crushing everything in their path. Vorthix soldiers, evolved for life at standard gravity, flailed helplessly as they were battered by debris clouds that moved with the inexorable force of orbital mechanics. Through it all, Kellen moved like he'd been born in zero gravity, using handholds and leverage points that his smaller human frame could reach, while his enemies struggled against their own biology. Every time a group of survivors tried to organize a defense, they found themselves facing precisely calculated attacks that exploited their species' evolutionary blind spots. In the command center, Senior Arching Yethmora watched the tactical displays with growing unease. How many casualties? 137 confirmed dead, BlackHFY reported. Another 46 wounded beyond combat effectiveness, all from a single human soldier armed with improvised weapons. The Archon's psychic emanations darken and our research data secured in the primary laboratory, but Archon, the human's tactical capabilities, suggest something our xenobiologists missed. He's operating with a level of strategic thinking that contradicts our behavioral models. This isn't just individual resistance, it's systematic warfare doctrine. Yethmora's holographic form flickered as he processed this information. If one human soldier could cause this level of destruction, what would happen when thousands of Coalition Special Operations troops arrived at Vorthik facilities throughout the galaxy? Accelerate the timetable, he commanded. Contact all research stations. Begin immediate termination of all human subjects. We cannot allow this contamination to spread further. But even as the orders went out across Vorthik space, reports were coming in from other facilities. Human subjects who had shown previous compliance were now exhibiting aggressive behavior. Some had escaped containment. Others had begun communicating with each other through methods the Vorthik couldn't comprehend. The Parasite program, designed to create perfect infiltrators, had instead awakened something the collective had never encountered: a species that fought harder when cornered, thought clearer under pressure, and turned every disadvantage into a weapon. Kellen Voss wasn't just a failed experiment. He was a preview of humanity's true nature, and that preview terrified the galaxy's apex predators. The emergency session of the Vorthik War Council convened in virtual space. 13 senior Archons manifesting as psychic projections above the collective's primary command nexus for the first time in 3 centuries. They faced a crisis that threatened their absolute dominion over lesser species. The contamination spreads, reported Archon Nextel, whose jurisdiction included 17 research facilities. Human subjects across 7 star systems have begun exhibiting similar resistance patterns. Station VEC-12 lost complete containment yesterday. 41 personnel dead, all research destroyed. Arching Yethmora's emanations carried undertones of controlled fury. This Kellen Voss has somehow transmitted his knowledge to other human subjects. Our biologists claim such neural networking is impossible for their species, yet evidence suggests otherwise. The tactical projections showed the scope of their problem. Of the 37 active research facilities containing human subjects, 15 had reported anomalous behavior. 3 had gone completely dark. The Parasite program, meant to create perfect infiltrators, had instead forged something unprecedented: a distributed intelligence network among captive humans. Recommend immediate termination of all subjects, suggested Archon Velkaris, the collective's primary military strategist. Sterilize every facility and eliminate potential contamination vectors. Negative, Yethmora replied. Intelligence reports indicate Coalition forces are mobilizing for rescue operations. If we destroy the subjects now, they'll know we've identified the threat. Better to appear incompetent than reveal our awareness of this evolution. Back on Research Station Keth-7, Kellen had penetrated the primary laboratory complex through a maintenance shaft barely large enough for his human frame. The Vorthic guards expected attacks from main corridors and access tunnels, not from spaces designed for automated repair drones. What he found in Laboratory Complex Alpha made his hands shake with rage. Dozens of humans floated in biosuspension tanks, their skulls open to expose brain tissue, while Kethmori parasites ripped through their neural pathways. But these weren't adults, they were children, some no older than 10 years, harvested from civilian colonies for optimal neuroplasticity. Dr. Nauthix never heard him coming. The xenobiologist died with Kellen's improvised blade severing her primary nervous cluster. Her last sensation, the cold realization that her life's work would die with her. Around the laboratory, her research assistants met similar fates as Kellen, moved through the facility like an avenging angel. But terminating the research team was secondary to his real objective. Each biosuspension tank contained not just a human child, but months of accumulated data on Vorthic neural manipulation techniques. Kellen began downloading everything, not just the research files, but the manufacturing protocols for creating anti-parasite compounds, the biological markers that identified Vorthic infiltrators, and most critically, the genetic sequences that made certain humans immune to neural domination. The data revealed the true scope of the collective's plans. Phase 1 had been infiltration using captured humans as unwitting spies. Phase 2 involved biological weapons designed to target human DNA specifically. But Phase 3 was genocide on an unimaginable scale, engineered plagues that would make every human world uninhabitable within months. As Kellen uploaded the data to his improvised transmitter, proximity alarms began screaming throughout the facility. Commander Black HFY had finally cornered his prey, surrounding the laboratory complex with every remaining soldier on the station, human. Black HFY's voice echoed through the intercom system. "You have 30 seconds to surrender before we flood that section with neurotoxin gas." Kellen's response came through the same system, his voice carrying an edge that made several Vorthic soldiers step backward involuntarily. "Commander, I've got something you need to see." The main laboratory's holographic displays suddenly activated, showing high-resolution images of the suspended human children. Kellen's transmission was broadcasting on all frequencies, not just to coalition forces, but to every news network, every pirate band, every independent trader in human space. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kellen's voice carried clearly across the star systems, "meet your enemies. This is what they do to our children. This is what they're planning for all of us." The reaction across human space was immediate and volcanic. Admiral Nakamura's Third Fleet abandoned all pretense of diplomatic protocol and began emergency acceleration toward Vorthic territory. General Holloway's ground forces started boarding assault transports. Most ominously, the Soul Defense Network began powering up weapons that hadn't been activated since the Proxima War. But it was the civilian response that truly terrified the Vorthic collective. Independent mercenary companies, normally fractured by competing interests, began forming unified battle groups. Mining corporations converted their industrial ships into impromptu warships. Even the notorious Outer Rim pirates declared a temporary truce with coalition forces, offering their services for free. Humanity had seen what was being done to their children, and they wanted blood. Archon, Commander Black HFY's transmission reached the War Council with barely controlled panic. "The human has weaponized our own research against us. Coalition forces are mobilizing across 17 systems. Our intelligence networks report unprecedented unity among human factions." Yet Mora's psychic emanations carried overtones of grudging respect. "This creature has accomplished something we deemed impossible. He has united an entire species through shared outrage. Military doctrine suggests we are no longer facing isolated resistance. We are confronting coordinated warfare." The implications rippled through the War Council. The Vorthic collective had conquered hundreds of species over millennia, but never one that became more dangerous when threatened. Every previous enemy had broken under sufficient pressure, their survival instincts overriding their resistance. Humans appeared to operate under different rules entirely. New directive. Yet Mora announced, "All research facilities are to begin immediate evacuation, destroy all evidence, and eliminate all subjects. If we cannot control this species, we must ensure they never discover the full extent of our operations." But even as the orders transmitted across Vorthic space, Kellen was uploading the final data package complete schematics for every research facility in the galaxy, detailed personnel files on Vorthic command structure, and most devastating of all, the biological weapons protocols that revealed exactly how the collective planned to exterminate humanity. The war between humans and the Vorthic collective had officially begun, and Kellen Voss had just provided his species with everything they needed to win it. In a laboratory complex, surrounded by hundreds of alien soldiers, he smiled as the upload completed. Whatever happened next, humanity would know the truth. They would know what they were fighting for and what they were fighting against. The real battle was just beginning. Coalition Strike Group Hammerfist translated from hyperspace at the edge of the Keth system with the fury of an awakened god. Admiral Reiken Nakamura's flagship, the Dreadnought Retribution, led 17 capital ships and 43 escort vessels in humanity's first major offensive against Vorthic space. Admiral, reported Captain Torres from the tactical station. Long-range sensors detect massive Vorthic fleet movements. They've had 6 hours to prepare since Voss's transmission. We're looking at 40-plus enemy vessels in defensive formation. Around the research station, Nakamura studied the tactical display, her expression carved from ice. The Vorthic had positioned their forces in a classic defensive sphere, using the research station as bait to draw coalition forces into a kill zone. Under normal circumstances, attacking such a fortified position would be tactical suicide. But these weren't normal circumstances. All ships, this is Admiral Nakamura. She broadcasts on fleet-wide channels. You've all seen the intelligence from Captain Voss. You know what they've been doing to our people, to our children. Today we show the galaxy that humanity doesn't forget, and that we sure as hell don't forgive. All vessels, weapons free, burn them all. The opening salvo came from the Vorthic fleet concentrated plasma, beams and quantum torpedoes that could vaporize a small moon. The coalition formation scattered, their ships dancing through space with the desperate grace of predators avoiding a trap. But humanity had learned tactics from 3 centuries of warfare against hostile environments, and their ships were built to take punishment. The Dreadnought Retribution absorbed a direct hit from a Vorthic plasma cannon that would have destroyed most vessels. Instead, her adaptive armor plating redistributed the energy while her point defense systems carved, attacking fighters from space like a scythe through wheat. Return fire, all batteries. Nakamura commanded. Humanity's answer came in the form of kinetic penetrators, simple chunks of tungsten accelerated to relativistic speeds. The Vorthic had grown accustomed to energy-based warfare. They were unprepared for projectiles that punched through their shields like they weren't there. Vorthic battlecruiser Kethmer died first, her hull shredded by a tungsten rod moving at 30% of light speed. The projectile carved through 17 decks before detonating the ship's plasma core, turning the massive vessel into a brief star. But the Vorthic weren't helpless. Their fleet commander, war leader Gixanathal, had studied human tactical doctrine for months. As coalition forces pressed their attack, hidden weapon platforms throughout the system activated, creating crossfire zones that caught human ships in devastating energy barrages. The destroyer Midway vanished in a plasma storm that left nothing but ionized particles. The cruiser New Sydney lost half her crew when a quantum torpedo breached her armor and flooded 3 decks with deadly radiation. Human casualties mounted as the Vorthic fleet's superior numbers began to tell. Meanwhile, on Research Station Kes-7, Kellen faced his final battle. Commander Black HFY had sealed every exit from the laboratory complex and was systematically flooding each section with neurotoxin gas. The human soldiers Kellen had thought about during his captivity were now dying in space above him, their sacrifice giving him the chance to complete his mission. 47 confirmed kills on human vessels, reported Black HFY's tactical officer, but they're adapting faster than predicted. Their kinetic weapons are proving unexpectedly effective against our defensive systems. The battle raged across 3 dimensions as coalition forces pressed deeper into the Vorthic formation. Captain Elena Rodriguez, commanding the heavy cruiser Gettysburg, led her ship into a close-range duel with 2 Vorthic destroyers. Her vessels, armor blackened and scarred from dozens of plasma impacts. Port armor is down to 30%, her damage control officer reported. Main gun battery offline. We're losing life support on decks for through 7. Then we better finish this quick, Rodriguez replied, ordering her ship to ram the nearest Vorthic vessel. the Gettysburg struck the enemy destroyer amidships, both vessels disappearing in a fireball that illuminated half the star system. Such sacrifices were repeated throughout the fleet. The light cruiser Darwin held position against impossible odds, her crew continuing to fire even as plasma beams carved through her hull. The destroyer Copernicus used her dying moments to create a debris field that destroyed 3 Vorthic fighters, but humanity's losses had meaning. Each sacrifice bought time for the primary assault force to companies of Coalition Special Operations troops, led by Colonel Marcus Stone, Kellen's former commanding officer. Stone's assault transports punched through the battle zone, their hulls scarred by defensive fire, their holds filled with soldiers who'd volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. The transports carried something else, portable broadcast equipment, that would let them transmit whatever they found to the entire galaxy. "Boss, you magnificent bastard," Stone muttered as his transport shuddered under enemy fire. "Hold on just a little longer." On the research station, Kellen had reached the final phase of his plan. Using components from the destroyed laboratory equipment, he'd constructed a massive improvised explosive device from the station's power core. The blast would destroy the facility and everything in it, including him, but it would also eliminate the research that could doom his species. Commander Vreck's HFY forces had finally breached the laboratory complex, their plasma rifles sweeping corridors filled with toxic gas and debris. They found Kellen in the station's primary data core, his hands working frantically at control panels, while biosuspension tanks containing human children formed a protective barrier around him. "Surrender, human," Vreck's HFY demanded, his rifle trained on Kellen's chest. "Your fleet is dying. Your people will follow." And this futile resistance. Kellen looked up from his work, his eyes blazing with the same fury that had sustained him. "Through days of carnage, you made one mistake, Commander. You thought this was about saving myself." His finger pressed the final control sequence. The explosion that consumed Research Station KES-7 was visible from 3 star systems away. The station's power core overloaded in a cascade failure that turned 40 cubic kilometers of metal and biomatter into expanding plasma. Commander Vreck's HFY and his entire command staff died in the first microsecond, their bodies vaporized before their nervous systems could register pain. In space above the dying station, Admiral Nakamura watched the fireball through her flagships. Reinforced viewports, the Coalition had lost 9 ships and over 3,000 personnel, but they also eliminated a primary Vorthic research facility and rescued 47 human children from the biosuspension tanks. "Admiral," Captain Torres reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the explosion site." It's Captain Voss's voice. The message had been embedded in the station's destruction. BROADCAST on a frequency that would carry across half the galaxy. "This is Captain Kellen Voss, Coalition Special Operations. The data is uploaded. The coordinates are transmitted. Hunt them all down. Make them pay for what they did to our children across human space." The message was received and understood. The war against the Vorthic Collective would be fought without mercy, without quarter, and without end until every last research facility was ashed and every war criminal was dead. Kellen Voss had kept his promise. Humanity would never forget. The Vorthic Collective's response to the destruction of Research Station KES-7 was swift, brutal, and strategically catastrophic. Senior Archon Yathmora, his psychic emanations darkened by fury and fear, authorized the deployment of planet-killer weapons against 3 human colonies. As a demonstration of collective power, the worlds of Haven, New Perth, and Kepler's Promise died within hours, their biosphere sterilized by quantum disruptors that reduced living tissue to molecular ash. 6 million humans perished in the attack, including 400,000 children. The collective expected this overwhelming show of force to break human resistance, as it had with dozens of species before them. Instead, it triggered something that would haunt their empire forever. Humanity unified in absolute genocidal rage. Emergency sessions convened across Coalition space. The Parliament on Earth voted unanimously for total war authorization. The Independent Colonies Assembly, normally fractured by political disputes, pledged every available resource to the war effort. Most ominously, the Solar Defense Network began manufacturing weapons that violated every interstellar treaty, planet killers designed to turn Vorthic worlds into lifeless rocks. But the war's true turning point began in an unlikely location, the research facility on Vorthic Prime itself. where Dr. Quender had continued her studies of human psychology, even as her colleagues died across the galaxy. Archon, she reported to Yethmora through Quantum Link. Our analysis of the human response patterns reveals a critical miscalculation. This species doesn't break under extreme pressure. They become more dangerous. Their psychological profile suggests they will pursue this conflict to mutual extinction rather than accept subjugation. Yethmora's holographic form flickered with irritation. Impossible. All species prioritize survival above ideology. Sufficient pressure will force capitulation. Not humans, Archon. Their historical records show they fought wars that cost them millions of casualties rather than surrender to oppression. They once fought a conflict that killed 70 million of their own people, rather than accept territorial expansion by another human faction when threatened with extinction. They don't submit, they ensure their enemies share their fate. The implications chilled the War Council. The Vorthic Collective had ruled through intimidation for millennia, but they'd never encountered a species that responded to threats with escalation rather than submission. Meanwhile, coalition forces had received intelligence that changed everything. Captain Voss's final transmission had included detailed schematics of Vorthic bioresearch facilities throughout the galaxy, but buried in the data was something even more valuable: the location of the Collective's primary command nexus on Vorthic Prime. Admiral Nakamura stood before the assembled Coalition War Cabinet, her uniform bearing the ashes of 3 destroyed worlds. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one opportunity to end this war before it destroys both our species. Captain Voss's sacrifice gave us the location of their command nexus. We're going to hit Vorthic Prime itself. The audacity of the plan was breathtaking. Vorthic Prime lay at the center of collective space, protected by defensive fleets that numbered in the thousands. No enemy force had ever penetrated the system's outer defenses, let alone threaten the homeworld itself. Intelligence estimates suggest we'll face defensive forces outnumbering us 50 to 1, reported General Holloway. Even with our new kinetic weapons, the casualties will be catastrophic. Then we make sure those casualties mean something, Nakamura replied. We're not just attacking their military, we're targeting their entire command structure. Without central coordination, their empire fragments into competing factions. The war ends not with our victory, but with their civil war. Operation Lazarus, launched 7 days later, every available coalition vessel, from massive dreadnoughts to converted civilian transports, formed the largest human fleet in history. 347 ships carrying a million personnel, soldiers, technicians, and volunteers who knew they might never see home again. The fleet's composition told the story of humanity's unity in the face of extinction. The dreadnought Vengeance flew alongside the converted mining vessel Honest Pay. Corporate security forces fought beside coalition marines. Pirates, who'd spent decades raiding human shipping, now served as escort pilots for the vessels they'd once attacked. But the fleet carried more than weapons. Deep in the holds of the flagship Retribution, a team of xenobiologists worked frantically to perfect a weapon derived from Captain Voss's intelligence, a biological agent, specifically designed to target Vorthic neurochemistry. Unlike the Collective's proposed genocide weapons, this agent would render Vorthic temporarily unconscious rather than dead, providing a means to end the conflict without mutual annihilation. The approach to Vorthic Prime took 16 days through hyperspace lanes that had never seen human vessels. When the Coalition fleet translated back to normal space at the edge of the system, they found themselves facing a defensive armada that stretched across millions of cubic kilometers. War leader Gixanathal, survivor of the battle at K7, commanded the Collective's response from the super dreadnought Dominion. His tactical displays showed the approaching human fleet. With grudging respect, these creatures had somehow unified their fractured species in pursuit of vengeance. All vessels, prepare for final battle, Gixanathal broadcast across the Vorthic formation. These humans seek to destroy our homeworld. We will show them the price of challenging the Collective. The battle began at extreme range, with Vorthic plasma cannons reaching out across astronomical distances to rake the approaching human vessels. The Coalition formation scattered, their ships weaving through space in a vase of patterns that had been perfected during centuries of warfare against hostile environments. But this time, humanity had learned from their losses. The fleet's composition included dozens of vessels equipped with experimental shielding technology reverse-engineered from captured Vorthic equipment. Instead of absorbing enemy fire, these shields reflected energy attacks back at their sources. The first Vortic casualty came when the battlecruiser HFY fired a full-power plasma beam at the Coalition destroyer Defiant, the human vessels. Experimental shields not only deflected the attack, but focused it into a concentrated beam that punched through the Vortic ship's armor like tissue paper. Impossible. Gexenthal snarled as his flagship shuddered under kinetic impacts. Their defensive technology shouldn't be that advanced. What the war leader didn't understand was that human military doctrine had evolved. During the week-long journey to Vortic Prime, instead of trying to match collective technology, human engineers had focused on turning that technology against itself. Every weapon the Vortic used became a potential tool for their own destruction. The breakthrough came when Captain Sarachan, commanding the heavy cruiser Yorktown, realized that Vortic plasma weapons operated on predictable frequency patterns. By modulating her ship's shields to match those frequencies, she could create resonance cascades that fed back through enemy weapon systems. All vessels implement Chen Protocol. Admiral Nakamura ordered across the fleet turn their own weapons against them. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. Vortic vessels found their plasma cannons overloading, their quantum torpedoes detonating in their launch tubes, their defensive systems cascading into failure as human ships turned the collective's technological superiority into a fatal weakness. But the Vortic had thousands of years of military experience, and they adapted quickly. War leader Gexenthal ordered his forces to abandon energy weapons entirely, switching to kinetic projectiles and guided missiles that couldn't be reflected or redirected. The battle devolved into a brutal slugging match fought at point-blank range. Human vessels, built to survive in hostile environments, proved capable of absorbing tremendous punishment. But the Vortic had numbers, and their crews fought with a desperate fury and defenders protecting their homeworld. The destroyer Thermopylae died, covering the withdrawal of 3 damaged cruisers, her crew continuing to fire even as her hull broke apart. The battleship Constitution ran the Vortic super dreadnought Infinite, both vessels disappearing in a fireball that briefly outshone the system's primary star. But for every human ship that died, 2 Vortic vessels joined them. The Coalition's technological advantages and tactical adaptability were evening odds that should have been impossible to overcome. Admiral, reported Captain Torres, we've lost 43 vessels, but we're through their outer defense perimeter. The orbital platforms around Vortic Prime are in range. Nakamura studied the tactical display, calculating the cost of victory. Half her fleet was dead or dying, but they had accomplished the impossible. They'd fought their way to the heart of the Collective's empire. All remaining vessels, prepare for final assault, she broadcast. We finished this now. The assault on Vortic Prime began with a coordinated strike against the planet's orbital defense platforms. These massive installations, each the size of a small moon, had protected the Collective's homeworld for millennia. But they'd been designed to repel conventional attacks, not the asymmetric warfare humanity had perfected. Instead of trying to destroy the platforms directly, Coalition forces targeted their power distribution networks. Human boarding parties, led by surviving special operations troops trained in the same techniques Captain Voss had used, infiltrated the stations and sabotaged their systems from within. The platforms died one by one, their massive weapon arrays falling silent as their power cores overloaded. The path to Vortic Prime lay open, defended only by the remnants of the Collective's once mighty fleet. On the planet's surface, Senior Arch and Yethmora watched the approaching human vessels. With something approaching respect, these creatures had accomplished what no species in recorded history had managed. They'd fought their way to the Collective's homeworld and forced a reckoning. Prepare the ultimate contingency, he ordered his subordinates. If we cannot rule, then let all burn together. The final phase of the battle was about to begin, and both species faced the choice between victory and mutual annihilation. The surface bombardment of Vortic Prime began at 0800 local time, but Admiral Nakamura's target wasn't population centers or industrial complexes. The kinetic penetrators that rained down from the surviving Coalition fleet struck with surgical precision, each tungsten rock guided by intelligence Captain Voss had died to provide. Senior Arch and Yethmora felt the first impact through the bedrock of his command bunker, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Collective's capital city. The reinforced structure, designed to survive planetary bombardment, shuddered as human weapons found the precise structural points that would cause maximum disruption to the command network. Archin reported his aide. Communication with 17 regional commanders has been severed. The humans are targeting our neural relay stations with impossible accuracy. Yet Mora's psychic emanations carried overtones of bitter admiration, even in death. The human Kellenvoss continued to wage war against the collective, the intelligence. He'd stolen included not just facility locations, but the complete architecture of Vorthic command and control systems above the planet's surface. The remnants of humanity's fleet pressed their attack despite catastrophic losses. The dreadnought Retribution had lost main power and was running on backup systems. The heavy cruiser Indomitable was held together by emergency force fields, and the determination of her crew, of the 347 vessels that had entered the system, fewer than 60 remained combat effective. But those 60 ships carried something that would change the course of galactic history. Admiral, reported Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the fleet's chief xenobiologist. The atmospheric dispersal system is ready. The bioagent derived from Captain Voss's intelligence has been loaded into atmospheric penetrators. We can deploy it across the entire planet. Nakamura stared at the tactical display, weighing the decision that would define humanity's future. The bioagent would render every Vorthic on the planet unconscious for approximately 72 hours, long enough to capture their entire command structure without the mass casualties that would fuel centuries of vengeance. Do it, she ordered. The atmospheric penetrators descended through Vorthic Prime's atmosphere like metallic rain, each one releasing a cloud of engineered microorganisms that targeted specific neural receptors, unique to Vorthic physiology. Within minutes, the planet's entire population, over 4 billion beings, simply fell asleep. The silence that followed was deafening. In his command bunker, Senior Archon Yetmora felt consciousness slipping away as the bioagent reached even the deepest sealed environments. His last coherent thought was a recognition of the terrible irony. The collective had fallen victim to the same biological warfare they planned to use against humanity. Coalition landing forces, protected by sealed environmental suits, descended to a world where every enemy had simply stopped fighting. The conquest of Vorthic Prime was accomplished without firing a single shot on the planet's surface. The war's end came not with a massive battle, but with a broadcast transmitted from the collective's own communication networks. To all Vorthic forces throughout the galaxy, your homeworld has fallen. Your command structure is in our custody. You have 72 hours to surrender all human prisoners and cease all military operations. Failure to comply will result in the permanent occupation of your worlds and the dissolution of your government. The response was swift and decisive. Vorthic commanders throughout the galaxy, cut off from central authority and facing human fleets, equipped with weapons that turned their own technology against them, began surrendering in droves. Research facilities that had tortured human subjects for months were liberated by coalition forces, who found detailed records of every atrocity. The trials that followed became known as the Vorthic Tribunals. Senior Archon Yetmora and his inner circle faced justice for crimes against sapient beings, their own biological research used as evidence of their intent to commit genocide. The sentences were severe, but not vindictive imprisonment, rather than execution, punishment rather than revenge. But the war's true legacy wasn't legal proceedings or territorial redistribution. It was the transformation of humanity itself. The species that had been scattered across dozens of systems, divided by politics and economics, had unified in the face of extinction. The coalition that emerged from the conflict wasn't just a military alliance, it was a fundamental shift in how humans saw themselves and their place in the galaxy. Captain Kellenvoss was posthumously awarded the coalition's highest honor, the Solar Cross, for his sacrifice and the intelligence that had made victory possible. But more than medals, his legacy lived on in the doctrine that bore his name, the Voss Protocols, which established that humanity would never again allow any species to prey upon human civilians without consequence. 6 months after the wars, and Admiral Nakamura stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Voss Memorial Station, built in the same orbit where Research Station Kes-7 had once conducted its horrific experiments. The station served as both a monument to the war's victims and a training facility for the Coalition's new Xenological Defense Corps. Admiral, reported her aide. The latest intelligence reports indicate that 17 former collective species have requested defensive alliances with humanity. They're calling us the Guardian Species. Nakamura nodded, watching as transport ships arrived carrying the last group of human prisoners recovered from Vorthic facilities. Over 12,000 people had been rescued, many bearing the scars of biological experimentation, but all alive and free. The galaxy had learned something important during the war. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. When threatened, they didn't break, they became more dangerous. When their children were harmed, they didn't negotiate, they unified for total war. When faced with extinction, they didn't surrender, they ensured their enemies shared their fate. But perhaps most importantly, they learned to balance justice with mercy. The Vorthic Collective had been dismantled, its war criminals punished, its victims freed. But the Vorthic species itself survived. Their worlds returned to them under coalition supervision. Their people given the chance to build a future without the shadow of their former empire. As Nakamura watched the stars, she thought about Captain Kellen Voss and the choice he'd made in the alien laboratory. One human soldier, faced with impossible odds, had decided that some things were worth dying for. His sacrifice had not only saved his species, but had shown the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of when pushed to the brink. The universe was a dangerous place, filled with predators and prey, empires and slaves, but it now contained something new, a species that would fight for the innocent, protect the weak, and ensure that no one human or alien would ever again face the horrors that had been inflicted in the name of scientific progress. Kellen Voss had promised that humanity would never forget. He'd been right. They would remember, they would remain vigilant, and they would ensure that the galaxy was a little safer for all its inhabitants. The memorial beacon at the heart of Voss Station pulsed with steady light, visible from dozens of star systems, a reminder that some parasite had once thought they could control a human, and had learned late that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their refusal to give up, no matter the odds. The galaxy would never forget that lesson.